afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, BESE Board Candidates Forum. Since the issues that these two races, District 6 and 8, will be the same policy decisions, it is important for us to realize that they can be asked the same questions at the same time. So we decided to do it jointly. A couple of housekeeping things. If you need to use the ladies' room or men's room, go out the door, take it, it's down the hall, men straight ahead, ladies to the left. Okay? And all of you are invited to join Leaders with Vision. We're a group that is the catalyst for the people of finding out more information about vital hot subjects in our community. And now let us begin. Let me introduce our team. I'm Gene Armstrong, president of the league. I'm the Leaders with Vision. And Stuart, our secretary, is the timekeeper, and she's assisted by our treasurer, Shirley Brooks. So candidates, please keep your eye on them. Also, we'd like to welcome, Mary Washington, who is a past president of LAE and a former BESE board member. Belinda Davis, who is one district. Okay. And she is representing the parents' perspective on the panel. Okay. Next, we have Sherry Jurisco, and she is going to address early education issues. And last but certainly not least, is Nancy Roberts, Executive Director of the Louisiana Resource Center for Educators. Okay, and now we'll begin. A drawing was held earlier to establish the position on the panel. And candidate number one, you have 60 seconds to introduce yourself to the public. Lure Taylor.
I'm going to be keeping the time, and she's going to hold up a card at 30 seconds and then a stop card.
Terrific. How much time did you say to start?
1 minute.
1 minute. All right, let's go. Good evening. Since I was a child and since the time I corralled my two little brothers into a room and played school, I wanted to be a teacher. And now, after 30 years in education, 20 years as a classroom teacher, a stint as a high school administrator, I'm now a middle school administrator, and I once served as a district curriculum specialist. After all of that experience, I feel like I have the honor and opportunity to take my skills and my training to the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education. I'm not a politician. I don't intend to make politics my career. I have a career. I love my career. I want to use those experiences to better serve the children of our state. I have a heart for service, a record of excellence in the classroom, and an honest desire to help every child achieve.
Thank you. Kathy Edmondson.
Am I on? Ma'am. Good evening, I'm Kathy Edmonston. I am a employee of the Ascension Parish School System. I have been for 21 years and I continue to be employed. My title is Parent Facilitator. What I do is facilitate, mediate, collaborate with teachers and parents around students who are having sometimes academic and sometimes behavioral difficulty. I believe that I was pretty effective in my job until about 3.5 years ago, and it seemed at that time that I was having much difficulty in helping our students. That was when we ushered in Common Core, and I would just like the audience to know that I'm 100% against the Common Core State Standard Initiative. I plan, when I get on BESE, to work to look at what we can do to change the direction that we are going in this state. Our children, their parents, and our teachers have been cut out of the educational conversation, and I intend to make sure that they have a voice. Thank you.
Okay. Jason Ingen.
And my name is Jason Engen, and my story really begins in 2001 when I joined the military. One of the reasons I did that was to make a difference. And in 2006, when I left the Air Force, I felt like my life's goal was to make that difference and to help other people. And so when I saw the opportunity for BESE District 6, I thought, what better opportunity to help others and to make a difference than the opportunity to impact education for the children of our state. Since 2006, I've been in the engineering field here in Baton Rouge. I'm not part of the political elite. I have been fortunate to serve on some civic boards, the East Baton Rouge Planning and Zoning Commission, Industrial Development Board, and I want to continue that service, in this case to our kids. I think for too long we've been at the top of the bad list and at the bottom of the good list, and we've seen politics put over children, and what I want to see is children put first.
Jason France.
All right, I'm gonna assume mine's on, yeah. My name's Jason France, and I guess if everybody, welcome, and I'm glad everybody was able to make it here. If you were able to find this place, then I imagine that you care a lot about public education too. I worked at the Department of Education for 9 years, around 2003 to 12. And then after that, I left the department because I didn't like the direction it was going under John White and a lot of the education reformers, and I started a blog where I've covered education issues, particularly at the state level, pretty extensively for the last 4 years. So there's a lot of things that are going wrong with the education in this state. There's, I guess you could, the last 10 years, our scores on NAEP have actually not increased. They've stayed the same, while our test scores have seemed to go up. This is based on, I guess, some misdirection and subterfuge by the department. We don't know where we're going to go if we don't know where we are. So I want to be able to straighten that out. Thank you.
Right, that concludes the candidates from District 6, and now we'll start with the candidates from District 8. Carolyn Hill.
Good evening, I'm Carolyn Hill, and I currently serve on the Louisiana State Board of Elementary and Secondary Education. And it's a pleasure to be here this evening. I'm seeking re-election to continue to be a voice for our educators, to continue to be a voice for our students and school districts. For the past 2.5 years, it's been very challenging for me. I've been in the minority in regards to my vote, but I've stood on my principles and my morals and my values. And I ask that I be re-elected to the State Board of Education so I can continue to fight for our educators, for our students, and our school districts. Thank you.
Jada Lewis.
Good evening, I'm Jada Lewis. Little bit about me, I'm a Louisiana native who was born into a family of educators in the public education system. As a professional engineer who transitioned to work in higher education 4 years ago, I know the skills that students need to be successful in college, career, and in life. Currently, I'm serving as Assistant Dean at LSU, and I work hard every day to increase the number of females and minorities, not only pursuing degrees in engineering, but also completing degrees in engineering. I'm running for BESE because I want to be part of the team that transforms public education policy in Louisiana. I want to make sure that our kids can get good jobs and pull themselves out of bad situations. I've been involved in advancing STEM education and improving the lives of young people in Baton Rouge for over 20 years. I've mentored and transformed the lives of hundreds of young people as a youth leader at Bethany Church. I'm a person of action and results. I'm a team player who will not play politics at the expense of our kids. As your BESE member, I will be engaged in the community, committed to continued progress, available, accessible, and visible in District 8. Thank you.
Thank you. And we want to make one announcement for the record. Both the Louisiana School for the Deaf and the Louisiana School for the Visually Impaired were offered the opportunity to submit questions to this program, which I would have asked on their behalf. We did not receive any questions. Also, we wanted noted, we did ask the School of the Deaf to supply volunteer interpreters so that the deaf community would be served also. And we did not hear back from them. Thank you. Now we'll start with number one. Nancy, why don't you ask the first question?
Okay. Well, thank you all for putting yourselves out there and running for office. I think it takes a lot of courage. I want to ask a question about the difference in funding levels for charters. If you start a type 1 charter, you're obviously authorized by the local district. But if you start a type 5 charter, what we've had in the past with Recovery School District is seeding charter management organizations to the tunes of hundreds of thousands of dollars to attract them to come to our communities. So I'd like to ask you a little bit about what you know about that, and are you in favor of that?
And we'll start with candidate number 1. Lorraine?
Thank you.
It's 90 seconds.
90 seconds? 90 seconds?
90 seconds.
Okay, good, thank you. Let me say that I am not completely abreast of all of the funding issues in charter organizations and with the different types of charters. I am, however, greatly interested in taking a look at that type of information because I have seen some very effective charter initiatives. I know that LRCE had a wonderful charter incubator originally because I had several friends who went through that process in order to look at other ways for children to be, for children's needs to be addressed. I want to say that I am absolutely in favor of choice. I have been in the past in an unfortunate situation where I worked in a failing school, and I've seen those children, and I think parents and children need options when it comes to education, and I would absolutely be in favor of looking at that funding and ensuring that that funding is equitable.
Kathy?
Yes. Charter schools, I have a lot to say about it, so I'm just going to try to be as brief as I can. I have no problem with charter schools, but it seems as though in Louisiana, the charter school system has really been mismanaged. For instance, I work with a lot of special education children, and charter schools have been receiving, particularly in New Orleans, funds that come from IDEA, which is the Individuals with Disabilities Educational Act. Having received those funds into schools where there are no special needs children. So I have a problem with that. I really would like to see the New Orleans School Board take the schools that they recovered in RSD. I would like to see those come back. I recognize we can't jerk charters from parents, and I am for parental choice as well, but I just really believe that we need to, one of my issues in running is accountability and transparency, so I really would like to tackle that as soon as I get to Bessie. Thank you.
Jason?
One of my core beliefs is in empowering parents. And I think that in order to do that, you have to give parents the opportunity to go and seek out the best educational opportunity possible for their kids. And so I think that the system has created a void where charters have a place and where students were unable to get a quality education at their traditional neighborhood school. And so I think that charters have come in and filled that void. The issue of funding, I think, is a complex issue. I wouldn't be a fan of seeing dollars come out of IDEA. I think that the students that have disabilities, that's a very unique challenge, and that's something that we need to look at separately. However, when I hear the issue of a charter that where funding is actually being used to attract a charter, my question becomes, why are we trying to attract them? Do we have a system that is failing our students? And we're finding a need to say we need to bring in something different. And so if that's the case and we're seeing that the system is not performing adequately, then I would understand us going out and trying to attract a different option so that parents can send their kids and get a quality education for them.
Jason France.
Well, there's nothing that a charter school can do that a public school can't do better, and probably is doing better somewhere. A lot of the excess money that's going to these schools is being wasted. It's a waste of taxpayer dollars, and I'm not in favor of it. The charter industry has been able to, as Kathy mentioned, acquire funds they're not entitled to. They say that they want the money to follow the student, but actually in terms of, for instance, special ed, the IDEA funds, they found a way for the money from special ed kids that they don't serve to follow themselves, their bank accounts, and to go back to the places where they come from, like Michigan, Florida, California, New York. So I'm in favor of local control, and these charter schools are not locally controlled, at least the ones that are not controlled by the local school boards, these independent charters. So I think charters could have a place if they belong or if they're controlled or under the supervision of local school boards. But right now, there's some that have a whole different set of playing rules that they operate by.
Thank you. Carolyn?
Well, currently as the current BESE member, this has been a very controversial issue on the board for the past 4 years. When you look at these type of charters that's coming in, I've been a strong advocate for community-based charters, because who better yet knows their community than those who lives in their community. But what BESE has been faced with is a lot of out-of-state charters. These charters come into Louisiana, and they create, especially in the recovery school district, they come in and they take over these schools, and they're only here for 2 or 3 years and then they're gone. And then guess what? We have to try to replace them with another managing group. So it's like we're recycling our children, and they're still trapped in a failing school. So when you look at a type 1 charter, which is under local control, which I have worked for several local control charters, for example, J.K. Haynes. These schools are governed under the local school district. They still have the independent board, but they still have the management of the local school district, and some of them are working within our school districts. But the main issue that we're having is the type 2 and the type 5 charters, because the type 2 charters are charters that are denied by the local school district and approved by BESE. So you're already creating hostility amongst the local school district and the charter school, because they've already been denied by the local, and then we come and we approve them, so there's a hostility there, and then the resources are not flowing equitably across the board. And so that's a major issue. And of course, the recovery school district, bringing in these charters from out of state and don't have the understanding of the capacity of children that they're working with. Not only that, only stay in 2 or 3 years and then they're gone. They make their money and they're gone. And then my children are still trapped in failing schools. And so that's my stance in regards to the charters.
Thank you. Jada?
I do support parental choice as well. Many of you know I'm very public about serving on a Type 5 charter school in the North Baton Rouge area, Baton Rouge College Prep, that just opened recently in August 2015. Unlike these, major CMO charter management organizations, this is a small independent school run by a school director who's passionate about educating kids who don't have or who didn't have those opportunities. And so I will attest that all charters are not created equal. And as your BESE member, I will fight to make sure that they're accountable to what's in their charter contract. I will make sure that they're being good stewards of the financial resources that's given with their per pupil funding. And as I've talked to superintendents across my district, the resounding problem that they have is not around charters, but it's the inequitable of the funding and how that funding is spent. And so I really want to make sure that since charters are public schools, that we level the playing field, and that charters are still held accountable for those same policies and procedures, such as teacher retirement and different things that are becoming ballooning costs for the traditional public schools. And so I really want to focus on leveling the playing field to make sure that we have equity of options for our kids.
Thank you. All right, the next question will come from Sherry Jurisco.
I again, and also thank you for seeking this office. Appreciate you stepping out for that. The Louisiana Early Childhood Education Act 2012, Act 3, transferred all DCFS, so Department of Children and Family Services, early childhood operations to the Department of Education. BESE is now responsible for infant and toddler care, as well as 4-year-old programs, the licensure of child care businesses, and the administration of the Federal Child Care Development Block Grant, which is about $80 million in funding. So, over the last 5 years, the number of children receiving child care assistance has dropped from 40,000 to 15,000. And toddlers receive the bulk of that funding. So as a BESE member, I would ask you, what would you do to increase state funding for infant toddler care?
Kathy Edmondson, you begin. You have 90 seconds.
Thank you. First of all, I am not in favor of Bessie being in charge. I really feel like that should have stayed with the department, DCFS. As far as increasing funding, I'm not sure how we would do that, and I know that's a problem with Act 3 now being under us, but I'm not in favor of taking a lot of federal money. I think that all operations, as much as possible, should be local control for local communities. So I'm sorry I don't have an answer for that.
Okay, Jason?
Yeah, it is a very challenging question. I think the way that I view this is the ball has been handed to Bessie, and you have to perform. And so I think we need to put all the options out on the table, okay, and provide analysis on that. What options do we have for funding? Are there options that say maybe Bessie is not the most appropriate place, and then we have to look at legislative solutions? I think the important thing is to put it all on the table and say what options do we have, either to secure more funding or to provide a more appropriate way to care for the infants and toddlers. It's a complex issue, and I think it would take a further analysis and looking at all the options that we have.
Jason?
I don't think people recognize that Bessie doesn't have a very large staff. So they've been authorizing charter schools, and so they're supposed to oversee them. Now they've been given this right, but they don't have the staff to actually do these things very effectively. So I would recommend that this be returned to DCFS. I think they have the expertise for that. I don't think Bessie has done a very good job in the past with the responsibilities, and I don't think the department has done very good with the responsibilities they already have. I think it's a mistake to try to give them more. And some of the things that I've seen in regards to this particular change concern me. Some aspect of it might be mandatory. I think they mentioned that at the last forum I was at. I think this needs to be a local control type issue, but it also needs to be up to parents. I mean, going one step further. As for getting additional funding, that's going to be, I don't think that falls under, in fact, I know it doesn't fall under the MFP, the Minimum Foundation Program. So Bessie doesn't have the ability to pull in additional funding. They would have to work with the legislature, and that would be up to them to decide that. So I would think that they should recommend, explain where it is, and I would recommend they return it to DCFS, and then go from there.
Okay, Carolyn Hill.
Well, it's a very complex issue, and I can assure you that Bessie have had the lack of transparency in regards to putting information out there to parents regarding the transition from DCFS to LDOE. I think that LDOE has not done a great job with communicating what the changes are and how we're moving forward, and have really put out a clear guideline for providers and for parents. But when you think about the funding, the funding does not come through the MFP. We have something called the 8G grant, which is a block grant. And most of the school districts use that funding to actually create pre-K programs within the school district. For the past 2 years, I have fought because they've been trying to cut the 8G grant funding from the local school districts and create a more competitive piece to allow some of these other entities to be involved within the funding process. And so when you look at that, it's a very complex issue. And I think as a current board member, we have to revisit Act 3. And we have to come up with a plan financially and a plan of implementation to ensure that all our children are able to receive a quality education, especially in pre-K. So I will continue to fight. I will continue to fight for that 8G funding to allow local school districts to continue that funding so they can have pre-K program.
Thank you. Jada?
Yes, I support early education funding. I think it's very important in my current position. I take a more holistic approach. I look at that whole K through career pipeline, and I believe that if we give our kids an early start, it'll help them be more successful and lay that firm foundation so they can build on with these higher standards and increase rigor. And so with that, with the current budget situation, increased funding would probably not be likely. And so I think we really need to step back and look at some more innovative and more creative solutions. Working at LSU, we really believe in public-private partnerships. There are a lot of companies and different people and other stakeholders who are really invested in early childhood education and giving those kids, especially in the high poverty areas, that early start. And so I would really would like to visit the issue around public-private partnerships and maybe working with, LED and some of these other companies that's coming here to expand to really invest in early education.
Thank you. Lorraine.
I love a challenge, and it sounds like a challenge. It sounds as though we are absolutely at a critical point where we need to take a look at what we're going to do for infants and toddlers in this state, because we all know the importance of a strong foundation for children. I think that we need to explore all funding options. I think that we need to ensure that the available monies are being appropriated effectively. The bottom line is we all know the importance of early childhood development, and whatever it takes to provide our children with the appropriate foundation, we need to explore all options.
Belinda, your question, please.
So prior to the switch to the PARC test, my third grade son took the ILEAP in February, got his scores back in April, which allowed his teachers in the fourth grade to use that test in the fall to address areas of his academic weakness. How is our switch to PARC, a test that my child takes in February, but he and his teachers don't get back until nearly 9 months later, how can that test actually be used to further his educational attainment?
Jason Engen.
It's a very fair question. There's no question that it has taken too long to get the results. In order for the results to be meaningful, we have to be able to scale them. We have to understand what exactly they mean, and then we also have to get them timely so that if adjustments are needed, we have the ability to do that. So there's no doubt here that 9 months is far too long. I think there's more at play with this. Part of the problem with PARC and with Common Core has been in its implementation. And I think this is one of those ways that we're seeing these problems manifest. So no question, they need to be here more quickly. I think that some of the issue on the test, you've got to make sure that these are statistical issues. You got to make sure that they're analyzed correctly, that they're scaled properly, that the results are meaningful. And so I can understand early on that process taking a little bit longer. It's taken far too long this time. And so I do think that we need to make sure we find ways for that to be far more streamlined, far more quicker in the future.
Thank you. Jason France, please.
Okay, they're completely useless. They're not going to ever be used to help your kids succeed. That's not what their purpose is. They give them at the end of the year, and they're not going to give them to the teacher, their current teacher. So it's probably 4, 5, 6 months later. So that information is never going to be used for that. It's used for grading schools and it's determining which ones they've decided are failed schools so they can confiscate them and turn them into charter schools. That's the purpose of it. It's also to brand some schools that are mostly filled with children from poverty, that have high poverty concentrations. It's used to brand them as failing schools, even though the teachers in there may be very excellent teachers and doing the best they can with the students they have. So, and on top of that, I have a third grader too and a first grader. I talked to their teacher last year. Both of their teachers left because of all the ridiculous tests and requirements the state is putting on them. And they were excellent teachers and they didn't have to leave. My daughter has spent about a third of her time taking tests. The teacher showed me the list of tests that they have from the EBR, from the state, from the feds, all this stuff. And that's completely ridiculous. And PARC is just the most ridiculous of all of them, and super expensive. That needs to be eliminated. I don't see a problem with what we had. The problem we have right now is basically the management that the Department of Ed and the current BESE board that allows these types of travesties and ridiculous tests and meaningless tests to go on.
Carolyn Hill.
Well, I'm currently in the fight. So, this past week, we just request, a public records request from Superintendent John White to release the raw scores. I agree with you, Ms. Davis. No parent should have to wait this long to receive any test scores for their child or children. To be honest with you, when you look at the park assessment, everyone knows that I've been a champion in not favor in moving forward with the Common Core implementation. I've been one of those voices. And the issue that we have currently is what you're saying. Number one, the lack of parents not knowing, the uncertainty, and teachers being frustrated because they're put in a position where they don't know. And so now, even though the scores are in for park, superintendent does not want to release them at this current time because he has to go through this process. But if you think about it realistically, our children will be taking the same test very soon, and they do not know where they are or where they stand. And so I'll tell you, as a current BESE member, I'm currently in the fight. I'm currently working with other legislators and BESE members to try to get this information to parents as soon as possible. If it was up to me, you have it. You would have been at it. So that's my stance.
Jay Lewis.
I agree as well. As BESE, we really need to be responsive to the concerns of the parents and the teachers and the superintendents. And I also agree that we need to revise that timeline. It's too long, and part of BESE's responsibility is accountability to make sure that those results are implemented and incorporated into the curriculum and, you know, the day-to-day learning. And so it's our responsibility, if it's not being done, that it's done, right? I mean, you elected us to serve and be accountable for the decisions that we're making, and if we're not doing what we need to do, you need to get rid of us or, you know, restructure the board or the policies. And so I'm for making sure that we revise the timeline and making sure that the superintendents get the information in a timely effort, and that the teachers are equipped to integrate that in their day-to-day learning to make sure our kids are excelling and moving to those higher standards.
Thank you. Lorraine?
Well, it's certainly something that needs to be addressed. There have certainly been missteps in the implementation. I would hope that in the future we can solve this problem and get those scores back a great deal faster than what we have thus far. You know, as a test development specialist, if a test is valid and reliable in addressing the standards, it does provide educators, as you suggested, with valuable information regarding student growth. I agree with you on that. I do disagree with what I heard about the test scores being useless. We as educators at the school level do use those scores and that information to drive the instruction in our schools. I also agree that there are often far too many tests being given to children, but I see that mostly as a local problem, not as a state problem. The state doesn't mandate an excessive number of tests, but at the local level, I do see an excessive number.
Thank you, Kathy. Edmondson.
Yes, I have to disagree with Lorraine, because I do believe that is a state issue. But I just really believe that we have not been responsive since we began the process of implementing the Common Core State Standard Initiative. Not to sound redundant, but it was implemented in a dramatically awful way. It has impacted our teachers, it's impacted our students and their parents. It has been something that I believe has caused mistrust in the community, so that now it's difficult for people to really believe what comes out from the State Department and from our superintendent and from BESE. And so something seriously needs to be done about that, because parents are not able to trust their elected members and their superintendent, the administration. I would like to see the test scores come out, whether they're meaningless or not is really not the issue. The issue is they should be produced, and they should be produced now.
Thank you. Mary Washington, we have questions for the panel? Starting with Jason France.
Yes, thank you. And I too want to thank all of you for offering yourself as a candidate to the citizens in the 2 districts. My question is going to relate to test scores that have already been released. And that is, it was recently revealed that State Superintendent White has lowered the passing scores on the state LEAP test and end-of-course exams without informing BESE of his actions. Do you believe that this is grounds for his dismissal?
Actually, I've written about it and called for a dismissal on my blog. So yeah, I was aware of that. He's been doing it for the past 3 or 4 years. He actually produced something that I was one of the folks that requested and submitted a formal request to the department to release those test scores, the PARCC test scores. He sent us back something that shows clearly that the NAEP scores have not increased, but the iLEAP and LEAP scores have increased. It increased dramatically over his tenure, but he has completely misinterpreted that graph. I'd like to send it out later so you can see that. He's complaining as if he's not the one responsible for misleading everybody. It's absurd. He's like, well, we in Louisiana, we haven't been holding our kids accountable. We haven't been, holding them to a high standard, to rigor. He's made it so actually you can guess at most of the tests, and if you only know about 7% of the test, you can pass one of the end-of-course tests. So basically a first grader who doesn't know anything is going to be able to pass, like if you give a classroom of first graders, you give the test to them, let them pick random numbers, some of them are going to pass. That's how bad it is. And it's gotten worse under Superintendent John White, so he needs to be removed and quickly.
Okay, Carolyn Hill.
I believe mostly everyone in Apollo will know my position. But I can tell you this. As the current BESE member, for the past 2.5 years, we've been having this issue with John White. So this is not really the first major issue we've had with him taking responsibilities on his own without getting approval from BESE. This is a very critical issue because this is our children's lives at stake, because these are their test scores. And if it was up to me, I would be one of the ones that would vote to dismiss him. Because I believe in order to be able to have a good relationship with the board, you have to build that relationship. And so within the past 2.5 years, there has been a lack of trust with BESE and our state superintendent, not only with our educators in our community, even with BESE members as well. And so I can tell you that that's why we've been fighting. I've been in the fight for these past 2.5 years with Superintendent John White, because of the same issues that you have addressed, Ms. Washington. The lack of information as a BESE member, the request of public records when I've never received them, myself and other BESE members, and the lack of transparency. And there is a trust issue there. And so we can't move forward to try to make sure that our children have a quality education if we can't bridge that gap. And so my stance would be, he does need to be dismissed. Thank you.
Thank you. Jada Lewis.
I'm for transparency and accountability, and there's definitely been some issues of transparency and accountability, obviously. But my main concern is I really don't have an opinion whether or not to dismiss John White, because I'm not a current BESE board member. But when I'm elected, when that comes up in January, we can assess qualified candidates. But my whole stance on that is, if he has been such a problem for the last 2 years, he's consistently been given good reviews, and he's not been taken out of that position. And so I really think there are two sides to every story, and we really just need to hear both sides and really make sure that things are transparent and accountable. And if it's not, as a BESE member, we need to do something about it.
Marie?
Okay. It's certainly grounds for an investigation. I absolutely agree with that. There needs to be transparency, as Jada said, in providing accurate feedback, especially to schools, to districts, and to teachers. In my school, The really good, strong teachers want me to come in there every day. They ask me, when are you coming in? And they invite me in. What I think is incredibly important at the state level is that we have that type of transparency. I think that people who are doing the right thing should want people to come and take a look at what they're doing. I do not believe in calling for the dismissal of a superintendent based on an issue. I do believe that we have some great initiatives in our state at this point. I do believe that we are moving forward. I think our ACT scores are bearing that out. I think our graduation index is bearing that out. I think our graduation cohort rates are bearing that out. We have some progress going. My biggest fear is that we at this point in time begin to take steps backward. We've made steps forward. I've been fortunate enough to work in several highly functioning school districts who are doing an incredible job. They embraced high standards early on. They gave their teachers the awareness and the capacity to teach those standards, and we're moving forward. And it's a beautiful thing to see with the teachers and the students, and they're growing by leaps and bounds.
Kathy Edmondson.
Again, Lori, I'm not seeing the same statistics. I'm not seeing the same thing happen. Not to belabor the point, but the implementation of the Common Core State Standard Initiative was a disaster. It has continued to be a disaster. And I think we have said on the board, on the panel already, scores are being skewed. Scores are being manipulated. So that is an issue for me. And it's certainly an issue for our parents and the teachers that work so hard to get into the kind of like the way you would do Common Core when it came in without the legislature, without the public, without teachers, and all of a sudden everything was done. So it's very disheartening to me that now we're hearing that the scores are skewed. We're hearing that the superintendent will not release scores that need to be released. Again, it really doesn't matter if they mean anything or not. The point is, parents and teachers should be able to know what that information says. And BESE should be accountable to the constituents and not to Superintendent White. So I'll say that at the end of this year, it's my understanding that BESE will have an opportunity to look at whether or not to keep Superintendent White or whether or not to look for someone else. So I'm looking forward to that.
Okay, Jason Ingen.
One of my guiding principles in whether it be in business or in government is I want the best person in the job. And so in the case of the superintendent, whether it's Superintendent White or it's someone else, what I care about is the best person, finding the best candidate there and having them in that position. The superintendent is an employee of BESE. BESE has that appointment. And so absolutely there needs to be transparency, and BESE has every right to go and look at that information. What you're describing sounds terrible, and it is something that the board should have a look at. But ultimately the question of whether or not you dismiss or you reappoint to me comes down to who is the best person for that job. Could it be White, perhaps? Would somebody else be put up that maybe could be possibly? I would be willing to look at whoever was recommended and determine who is the best person for that position.
Right, question now comes from Nancy Roberts.
Okay, I'm going to ask you, I'll throw you a curveball here about career and tech ed, okay? Lauren Scott predicts, and many of the industry people predict, we're going to need around 83,000 workers. Currently, the high school performance scores, you must have an 18 on the ACT to get any points. However, if you make a 17, you do qualify for TOPS Tech, but you get a 0. You get 0 points if the student makes a 17. Would you comment on, one, I want you to comment on that, and secondly, the Accountability Commission.
Carolyn Hill.
Okay, well, I've been in support of the Jumpstart Initiative, which actually helped with the ROTAG in regards to our students being able to, because everyone is realistically, everyone is not deemed to go to college. So giving them an opportunity to be able to still have another chance if they choose to go their route. So I've been in support of the Jump Start initiative because I think that was an excellent initiative for our children to have more options at hand. In regards to the tops and the scoring, the 18 points versus the 17 score, I can assure you this, and this is something that I had a conversation with John Wright. I said, just because a score doesn't dictate a child, let's look at it holistically. Let's look at a portfolio to put together to see, meaning us, the educators, to put together to see how our children can move forward if they qualify in whichever area that may be appropriate for them. We've had those numerous conversations in regards to that. And so some things he's been open to, but we haven't been able to sit down to actually figure out how to construct or revise a policy. But I can assure you that with the Jump Start initiative, it will help those students who does not meet that benchmark to be able to go into the VOTEC career area to move forward.
Thank you. Jay Lewis.
Workforce development is definitely a cornerstone of my platform. It's what I do every day. Working at LSU, as I said before, I look at that whole K through career pipeline, and I'm really focused on preparation for college and career, right? And so that's my life, that's what I do. And so anything that's hindering the preparation or even the perception of, I guess, the value of those top tech, I think we need to revisit that. And TOPS is a priority for funding, we know that. And so if it's a priority for funding, it should be a priority in that formula of accountability. Even if it's a 17, if that's the floor, that's fine. So I would really work to revise that policy to make sure that those students are included in that formula, because at the end of the day, if it's a priority to fund, it should be a priority to be included in that formula. Thank you.
David Reed.
I have to agree about the Jump Start initiative. I think it's been absolutely incredible, and I've had an opportunity to see how that's developed at the secondary level, and I think we're providing some incredible opportunities for our children. I actually served originally on the park committee for the State Department of Education, and at that time, that was one of the major discussions was, what do we do for those children who we want to pursue those careers and be career ready when they finish school. So it's been something that's kind of been near and dear to me. I think that all accountability formulas deserve to be continually vetted in order to make sure that they reward both college and career-bound students in an equitable manner.
Kathy Edmondson.
Would you repeat that question for me, please?
First of all, would you give points? Currently, high school performance score, you get no points if the student makes a 17. However, it qualifies the student for TOPS Tech. And then the second part of the question is, would you keep the Accountability Commission, which they come up with these systems, would you keep the Accountability Commission as it is?
First of all, I think that's very inequitable. The 17 and 18, I think 0 is, that just reminds me of everything else we've done, and I don't think that's equitable at all. The Accountability Commission, someone needs to be working on accountability. I'm not sure it needs to be the commission, but the transparency that is needed at the State Department level and at BESE is a major concern for me. That is the second reason I'm running. The first reason is to eliminate Common Core. The second reason is to produce transparency on the BESE board and also to produce transparency in the State Department of Education and with our superintendent.
Jason Ingham.
Workforce development is one of the pillars of my platform. I believe that we need to have a well-educated, prepared workforce coming out of the system. As somebody in business, I consider myself an end user of the students coming out of our system. And so it's near and dear to me. It's very important. I think that prior to the oil and gas prices collapsing the way that they have, we would hear it seemed every week, Dan Bournet coming out and talking about $100 billion in industrial development. And then the next sentence would be, oh, by the way, we don't have any of the workers to get the job done. And so we've definitely needed to change our perspective. For decades, the norm was you have to send you have to go get a 4-year degree, or else nothing else matters. And I think that has expired. Okay, we need to make workforce development a priority. I am a huge fan of the Jumpstart program. The idea that a student can decide as a junior that they want to go a career route, and that 4 years in academics beyond high school is not the right route for them, I think is a great idea. Let them go, let them get a diploma, and let them. It's at 30 seconds.
I'm sorry, that's what I said, I couldn't see. Give him 30 seconds more, please.
So good.
I think it's great that they can get a diploma and that they can get a national level certification. I think that we need to continue to look and let the process evolve as we look more, as we transition more from the academic only route to now career development. We need to look at the accountability. We need to decide how that funding is going to go, because we have to continue to prepare kids to enter the workforce. The jobs are in demand and we need to prepare them.
Jason France.
I think the tragedy about, there's a tragedy behind that question, in that we've distilled students down to a single score. We've turned schools into the sum of a bunch of scores. And that's sad, I think. I think that should be upsetting to a lot of educators and a lot of parents, that a 17 or an 18, they're a 0, they're a failure. And we've gotten to a point where we have to grade schools and kids and teachers, and you're a success or you're a failure. And that's how, and this is just one more of the absurd things that we do. The accountability system is a joke anyway. They've changed it 9 of the last 10 years at least. I don't know that it's meaningful. It only has one element to it, test score. The test score, as we discussed earlier, is manipulated. So, I mean, the whole thing is a problem there. We should be evaluating schools on a wide variety of statistics and of information, and we should do that with students as well. In fact, I even know a doctor who got a 17 on the ACT. So not all kids test well, but that doesn't mean that they should be branded a failure for life, you know. And that's what I feel that a 0 and that this kind of branding of students in schools that we've gotten into the habit of doing is doing to kids.
Okay. Sherry, your question. And directed towards Jada.
Okay. Assuming that Act 3 holds and that everything with early care stays with the Department of Education, Louisiana is one of a handful of states that does not regulate home-based child care. Businesses that care for 7 or fewer children, unless they receive federal funds. We've seen some tragedy in those settings over the past year. And so my question would be, would you support licensing of these small child care businesses?
Yes, I think we need to have a level playing field among all providers, whether or not it's home-based or publicly based. I think licensing is very important to make sure everyone who's providing that service are qualified, there's some consistency in implementation, have learning standards. Most professions that are valued do issue licenses, nurses, engineers, teachers, and so if we're entrusting our kids to these centers, I really do think they need to be licensed.
Okay. Marie?
If these small businesses receive funding and are awarded licenses, then they should be held strictly accountable for the same rules that apply to everyone else. Simple.
Kathy?
I tend to agree that if they're going to receive funding, they do need accountability. I'm just not sure exactly who should be in charge of the accountability. Again, I hate to be redundant, but I just don't trust what is happening at this present time. I think almost everything needs to be put on the table for BESE when we get a new board and see exactly where we're going in regards to where we've been.
Jason Ingen.
If the center exists for an education-based purpose and it's receiving funding, then yes, I would agree that it needs to be licensed. There needs to be a set of standards that they need to achieve. We need to understand that they are doing things appropriately, and so yes, I would agree with that.
I think we want to be careful there. I think we do have a lot of boards that, in Louisiana that provide licenses for everything, and they get a lot of fees based on that licensing. But just because they're licensed doesn't mean that they're actually, the people that they've given the license to do a good job. The other problem is if we get into the case where we're licensing all these child care centers and everything, if we're putting more demands on them, the more demands we do, the more expensive they will be, and the more we take away choices and options from parents from low incomes that can't afford to put their kids in the most expensive licensed option. So I would be careful of doing that or branding some of these centers as lesser or good or better or something like that based on that criteria. But we definitely want to make sure that if we can, that these are safe and that people are held accountable when accidents happen.
Carolyn Hill.
Yes, I do agree with licensing. I believe that we need to make sure that all centers are held accountable. But the problem that I've seen throughout the tenure on the board, and I've met with some child care providers throughout the state, because I'm very passionate about early childhood education, is that we need to make sure that these standards and accountability implementations are equitable across the board. And we need to ensure that when we put these standards in place and these licenses in place for our child care centers or home-based centers, that we need to look at it, because one of the things that I'm finding, especially with the child care centers trying to compete with more big, I don't want to say corporations, but more programs or centers that have more resources that would be better. It's been a challenge there. And so one of the things that I've done, I've been able to go across the state and talk to these child care providers, and all of them agree. Of course, we need to have these licenses. They agree with that. But their problem is the fear of the standards and being X'd out of the formula, and won't be able to continue to succeed in that arena. And so we have to fix that as a board, and we need to revisit that as well.
Okay, now we're going to have some fun. Rapid fire questions, you've got 10 seconds to answer. And the question comes from Belinda Davis and goes to Jay Lewis.
Kenilworth Elementary in this district and Dalton Elementary in your districts are two charter schools that are not controlled by the local school board. When a parent comes to you and says, the CEO of my charter school and its board have failed to address my concerns, where do I go to a locally elected official to get my concerns addressed?
10 seconds.
Especially we're responsible to make sure that charter schools are accountable to parents, and so I would push that back to the Department of Education, and especially if it's an RSD school.
Great question.
You said they were under local control?
They're not under local control.
They're not under local control. Then certainly that needs to be addressed by the State Department.
Kathy?
I would have no problem as a seated BESE member for that concern to come to me, and I would be glad to take that to the State Department. I really feel like, again, that our parents, so user...
Tom?
I forgot that.
Jason?
Yeah, I would agree that if it's not under local control, then there has to be somewhere to go, and the buck should stop with the state.
Okay, Jason France.
I think the point of that question is that there is no local control, obviously. So that's a problem, and that's one of the reasons I don't think BESE should be approving these charters, because they don't have the personnel to do that, to actually
Thank you.
investigate this.
All right, Mary, you have a question? Again, candidates, it's only a 10-second response. I'm sorry, oh, Carolyn, I'm sorry, Carolyn, my mistake.
Well, I can tell you really quick, as the BESE member, I've had those complaints, and as the BESE member, I've put it on the agenda, because that's my responsibility, and I've challenged the department and John White to go in and do an investigation to see what's going on. I've made those.
I'm sorry, now, Mary.
Okay, thank you. As you know, the original purpose of charters were to help kids in failing school. So my question to you is, do you think BESE should approve charters over the objection of an A, B, or C school district?
And this one starts with Carolyn Hill.
No. I do not, because if a school is an ALB school district, they're doing well. So why do we need these charters? So you're creating a hostility once again within their community in that local school district.
Jada?
I think we should not take a blanket approach. We should go on a case-by-case basis based on that charter application and really do our due diligence to see if there's some different theory of changes not being offered.
Reed?
I believe first and foremost, we strengthen public schools. That's first on the agenda. But an ABC district still may have an F school.
Kathy?
I definitely do believe that we should, repeat the question one more time, I'm sorry.
Do you think BESE should approve charters over the objection
Right,
of
of the local school board. Now, anything that can be done locally, in my opinion, is the way we should go. Local schools, local communities, and local control.
Jason?
Every issue is not black and white. I wouldn't want to say that we couldn't do that. I think that BESE could potentially do that because there could be an F school inside of a B district.
Jason France?
No, and I won't.
Thank you. Okay. Now we'll start with 1 minute responses. You can do 1 minute or less. And we start with a question from panelist 3, which is Belinda Davis.
Already. I would like to say that as a parent, I am concerned about the amount of money that is being spent on BESE elections by businesses and business PACs. So as a parent, I'd like you to tell me whose voice matters more, the voices of parents or the voices of business owners in the education process, and please try to avoid telling me we're equal. Thank you.
Okay, we'll start with candidate number 4, which is Jason France.
Well, I don't have any money from PACs or any of those things, so it's obviously going to be taxpayers and parents. That's where, and teachers. That's where my money comes from. I would be curious how Lori and Jada and Jason Eng can answer that, since that's where all their money comes from. We have some billionaires that have also put in up to about $1 million. Jim Walton's put about $500,000 up for these elections in a couple of Grigsby's PACs, and they are backing some of my opponents. I don't think we have a voice if those folks play in our local elections.
Okay, Carolyn Hill.
Well, I tell people I'm the people's candidate. I don't have any funding from big businesses, but I can assure you, I've been an independent thinker for the past 2.5 years, and I've been the voice for our children, educators, and school districts, and I will continue to be that. I've taken stances that's been very controversial, and I've been in the minority, but it's okay because I'm doing what's right for our community and our children. So to answer your question, I will be the voice for the people, and that's why I am the people's candidate.
Jada Lewis.
Great question. I have received money from PACs and business communities. It takes money to run a campaign. It takes money to really kind of put your name out there, but I think my track record in the community speaks to my passion around kids and my desire really to improve the policies in education. Politics, people give money to candidates to have a voice, but at the end of the day, I'm the BESE member and I'm the representative, and I will do what's best for the kids. I will make those hard choices and do what needs to be done to be a voice for them.
You're right.
I think we're all stakeholders in education. I can't avoid it. I think we all have a voice. Right now at the state level, we're crafting new standards. We're strengthening the standards that we have, and there are lots of different entities at the table. I think it's important to have a diverse voice when we make decisions for our children. I mean this for one reason, and that's a genuine desire to serve and to help move our state forward. I have never been asked how I would vote on any specific issue, and I have never taken a single penny as a pledge of support for anyone's viewpoint besides my own.
Thank you.
Yes.
Kathy?
It does take money to run a campaign. I have several supporters in the audience. It's hard asking people for money, but that's what I've done. I've received no money from lobby, no money from any PACs, and it concerns me as well that we have people showing up with lots of money for a BESE race where there's no salary. So there's got to be some spin on that, and it's a real concern for me. But I'm proud to say I have not taken any money from any special interest group.
Jason, Amy.
I think that people put money where their priorities are. I think that we've seen people that have a passion for education and want to see our system improve. People in business that have money are, as I said, they're the end user. They're looking to see students come out well educated and well prepared. So the fact that they have a passion for education to me makes sense. As Mr. France mentioned, some of us have received money from them. I think that's because our views align. And I don't think there is no guaranteed vote. It's just that we agree on the same thing. And at the end of the day, we vote our conscience.
Okay, the next question comes from Mary Washington, and you have 60 seconds to respond to it, starting with candidate number 3, which would be Jason.
Do you think that the value-added model, which uses student performance as a major portion of teacher evaluation, is fair and accurate, and should it be continued?
This is another complex issue because I understand nothing's perfect, okay? But we have to find some way to analyze if what we're doing is working. And so one way to measure that is by student performance. Again, we understand that not everything's perfect. There are different backgrounds. There are different issues in play. But to look at that and say that it's not a measure of teacher performance, I think would be faulty logic. What we want to do is continue to evolve the process to make it as perfect as we can. But for right now, saying that we want to look at student scores and use that for analyzing how our teachers and our schools are performing, yes, I think that's a fair measure as we continue to evolve and work to a more perfect process.
Jason France.
Okay, I worked at a department where they were developing BAM, and it's garbage. I was in charge of the data. I was working with the folks that graded it. I've been covering it as garbage for years. It has 25% stability. It's actually rated some of the best teachers in the state as some of the worst. It has no validity, and it needs to be trashed as soon as possible. That's the truth. There is no improving this. It's a ridiculous model. It punishes the best teachers in our state, and it's a travesty.
Okay, Carolyn Hill.
Well, with the value-added model, to me, it has no substance. Myself and another colleague on the board, we advocated to actually suspend the value-added model with the new park assessment. But I had the opportunity to obtain a training in Washington, D.C. And one of the things in the training that they expressed to us was that no state should have a value-added model that 50% of the test scores be integrated into the value-added model in regards to teachers' observation. And so with that, Louisiana has done very poorly with that, because this should not be based on just one test score to say if a teacher is performing well in the school. So I've been in the trenches, and I've been advocating as the current board member in regards to value-added.
Jada Lewis.
As the new board comes on in January, I think a lot of these policies need to be revisited, right? And I do agree, as being an engineer with numbers, we need to look at the weights of this and make sure we're not penalizing our teachers, because as I talk to superintendents, teacher retention is a problem, right? And if that value-added model is discouraging and frustrating teachers, we need to look at that. Because I'm tired of these school districts having 50 and 75 long-term subs when we need to have highly qualified, competent teachers in the classrooms. And if value-added model is that barrier, we need to address it.
A strong accountability system is essential to teacher growth, but should consistently be examined and strengthened. I know that recently the automatic override of VAM was lifted so that we did not have a situation where at the school level a teacher was identified as highly effective, but when the VAM scores came back, that VAM score would do an override. I know that we have moved away from that just recently, beginning with this school year. So I'm looking forward to examining the use of VAM, how we use it in the state, and doing what we can to strengthen whatever current accountability systems we have.
Okay, Kathy Edmondson?
Yes. The model that we have in this state of one factor determining everything, we have it with students on their tests, we have it with VAM for the teachers, we have it with letter grades for the school grades. I am not in favor of that. I am definitely not in favor of VAM. And as Carolyn said, one of the big reasons is because 50% of the score for the teacher is determined by student performance. And when we have kids that are 2 and 3 grade levels behind trying to come in and do the Common Core that we have, that is absolutely inequitable. And I will do everything I can to look at that and stop it.
Thank you. And now we're going to go to the candidates' closing statements. And this will be a little different because we're going to take District 6, starting with Kathy Edmondson. And then we will move over to District 8. So starting with Kathy Edmondson, 1 minute, your closing statement. What do you want them to know?
As we've ushered in Common Core in the last 3.5 years, our public, our teachers, parents, even the legislature, have been unaware until the foundation was laid. The standards, the practices were brought in by those who had little personal interest in our children in Louisiana as individuals, but rather as a commodity to make money. Bill Gates, the Waltons, Walmart, Pearson Publishing, and other big money corporations stand to make and are making millions off the backs of our children. It is certainly public knowledge that Louisiana and many other states got race to the top funds, waivers, and grant money from the founders. But Bill Gates, for one, has admitted that Common Core has never proven and was never tested, and that it will take 10 years to glean the information as our children and our teachers are struggling. I've been in BESE meetings as parents and school officials have begged for information and support. Inaccessible webinars, newsletters, and toolkits have replaced people, actual people who could help and support parents
Thank you.
as they muddle through the curriculum.
All right, Jason Ingham.
Why should we settle for the status quo? Why should parents have to write $10,000 checks to send their students to private schools? For too long, the school system has failed, and we've settled for the status quo and put politics above children. I want to put children first. I want to empower parents to go find the best educational opportunity possible for their kids. All options are on the table, and whatever method, whatever solution we find, we want to make sure that we're providing students with the opportunity to come out well-educated and well-prepared, ready to pursue further academic studies or the workforce.
Jason France.
Okay, the status quo is up here right now. I mean, the lobby and all the big business and all the billionaires are funding these guys, and that's the status quo. That's what's ruined education for the last 10 years. And they're saying you're against the status quo, but being it is ridiculous. That's what you are. That's what you're doing. So that's completely insincere, and it is ridiculous. I mean, I don't understand how people don't understand that. Anyway, I am the best candidate for this. I've worked with every single department and program area at the Department of Education. So I know all the program areas, I know all the people. I've worked with every single school district in the state. So not just one school district. I didn't come into this race because I heard Chaz Rummer isn't running and I qualified in the last day. I've been involved in this fight for the last 4 years intensely, and I worked in the department 9 years before that. So I think you need to consider who is the status quo and who's going to stand up for you. I don't have PAC money. I don't have to answer to them, and I won't. Thank you.
Marie Taylor.
Thank
You have 1 minute.
For 40 years, our state has ranked near the bottom in almost every indicator of academic success. It's time we begin to move forward. I can tell you as a person in a successful district, working with teachers and students every day, the sky is not falling. We're moving forward. Parents are at the table right now, along with a diverse group of stakeholders across the state, crafting standards for all of us to move forward. Why would we even entertain the idea at this point of moving backwards? I believe in high academic standards that allow students to compete nationally and yes, globally. I believe in more educational options and choices in selecting schools for parents, but make no mistake, I believe first and foremost in strengthening public schools. I work in public schools, my heart is in public schools, my children went to public schools, they are the heart of who I am. But I also think accountability of teachers is another priority that would be reinforced with performance-based pay.
All right, we have now heard from the candidates from District 6. Now we'll turn to District 8, starting with Jay Lewis.
Good evening. I think it's a clear choice. We can tell from tonight I'm a very positive person. I believe it's time to stop being so negative about Louisiana. Our children deserve better. Our children deserve for us to be a team to move this state forward. I really think we need to turn these challenges into opportunities. I'm a product of public education. Everyone on my mother's side has been in public education as an educator. I will not do anything to jeopardize the future of my 4-year-old great niece and any other child in Louisiana. Thank you.
Carolyn Hill.
Well, I'm the current BESE member, and for the past 3.5 years, I have fought, I have advocated, I have sacrificed, and I will continue to sacrifice to ensure that all children receive a quality education. And the reason why I do this is not because of the money, because we don't make any money on BESE. I do it because I'm passionate about what I do. See, because I was one of those children who said I was not going to make it out of my neighborhood. But because of a quality education, I was able to succeed and do well. And so I live by this word, to whom much is given, much is required. And so because God has given me the opportunity to give back, it's my job to ensure that these children receive a quality education, even if it takes me sacrificing Carolyn and being in a position to do right by people and not by special interest groups. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for giving yourselves to the public and offering yourself for public service, and also for participating in this program. Would you please give a round of applause to our candidates? And now I'd like to have a round of applause for our volunteer questioners who did a brilliant job. Hopefully within 24 hours, this will be available on the Leaders with Vision website, lwvision.org. Good night, everyone, and be sure and consider joining Vision.